This is so important to me. This is what's so telling. The leftists, they always say, well, hold on a second. Palestine is not Hamas. You can't hold the people of Palestine accountable for their democratically elected terrorist leadership. But Rashida, sweetheart, you are the one drawing the link that Hamas and Palestinian human rights, that they're one and the same. Question of the day. I'm not a conspiratorial person generally. I don't think Rashida Tlaib is a terrorist. I think she's sympathetic to terrorists. Okay. And I'm going to build my case here. I want to hear what you think after this whole Israel situation going on this last weekend, along with everything else I'm about to present to you. Not necessarily a terrorist, but I think that, like, if she wanted to change her line of work, she could have Hamas dental in a company car.
Yeah.
The door's not closed. What you're saying. The door's not closed.
Okay.
She's on the higher.
So let's go with context here. Last week, of course, Rashida Tlaib was denied entry into Israel. There's more to it, but let's see a clip for those who missed it.
This is a country that has just made a huge error, I believe, and they're going to probably have to pay the cost of it. I mean, my goal is to see my grandmother. Again, she's in her 90s. This could be my last chance to see her.
Well, apparently that wasn't her goal. So this is important for people to know. First off, her and Ilhan Omar listed Palestine in the itinerary, didn't even mention Israel. And something that people need to understand, I saw a headline, I think it was from Washington Post, that said, Rashida Tlaib is allowed to enter Israel under one condition. No. Israel did not provide Rashida Tlaib with any conditions. This is important to note. She was the one who sent a letter to, I believe, the foreign minister that said, hey, I really want to see my grandmother. And by the way, I promise not to do any of the BDS, not to encourage any boycotts or protests. All Israel did, they didn't name any conditions. All they said was, all right.
Those jerks.
That's it. They said, all right. And then she said, you know what? I will not go under your conditions. Like, what? You sent the letter.
This is a crazy person talking.
And by the way, the reason we're doing this video is because she blocked us at the time of writing this segment and doing it. She blocked us on Twitter, which the courts have ruled is illegal. Updates to follow with the half-Asian Kraken. So since we can't respond there, we'll respond here. Here are some examples of Tlaib's ties to terrorism. So number 5, let's just start with her district. Okay, she's representative of Michigan's 13th congressional district. A lot of people don't necessarily know this, but it's an ongoing joke for people who live in Michigan. Comment people from Michigan, Dearbornistan. It's a support center for Middle Eastern terror. Probably sleeper cells there. Okay, there was a local business, actually, restaurant I used to go to, Lashish, which turned into Palm Palace. And what's funny is when you research this story, it says, oh, the guy who was deported, like he wants to come back to the United States because he was deported because of tax evasion. And no, it wasn't just tax evasion. It was funneling money to Hezbollah. Seems like that's a key detail.
That's a little bit bigger than just tax.
Yeah. And they've been, by the way, many Michigan residents arrested for joining ISIS, conspiring in terrorist plots. This is from an area that Tlaib represents, and this is important. This happens. I know you'll say, well, are they responsible for everyone in their district? No. But this happes disproportionately in Dearborn, Michigan. Nowhere else. Maybe it'll start happening in Minnesota. I don't know, because I hear that's going. But this is like the first sort of Islamic immigrant haven where it was very largely, demographically Islamic, and it's been going on there for a very long time in record numbers. Do we seriously think that these people aren't the ones who elected her for that reason? She said she sees herself as their representative. In her own words, she says she's more of a Palestinian in Congress than anywhere else.
Honestly, I've never felt more Palestinian than I ever felt in Congress. Even in Palestine, when I'm visiting my grandmother, I'm more American, like to the Palestinian. But I'm more Palestinian in the halls of Congress than I am anywhere in the country, in the world.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, there's a
trying
lot
to say with them.
Yeah, there's a lot of places in the country that have a large Muslim population that are fantastic and wonderful, and we're just saying basically that's fine. You can have a different opinion, just not death to America, death to Israel. I think the line kind of it's definitely there. It probably is a little earlier. Definitely there.
Or even let me into Israel. I promise not to be a dick. All right, I wanted to be a dick. Oppression. Now take that and add rockets, and you've got Hamas. Here's another example. CARE. We've talked about this. Tlaib is an avid supporter of CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations. She even spoke, I think we have a clip, at their annual banquet.
The Muslims are coming. Well, guess what?
That's a terrifying phrase.
Holy shiitake.
We're not only everywhere in all kinds of different governments, but mashallah, wow, we're in the United States Congress.
Nightmare.
I bet you would
Nightmare fuel.
Paul Revere. The Muslims are coming. Stop! They're children.
Exactly.
The Dearborn residents are coming. Okay. For people watching on YouTube, that doesn't make any sense. That was behind the paywall. You should join Mug Club.
Yeah, you really should.
Just to be clear, the U.S. Department of Justice listed CARE as an unindicted co-conspirator funneling money to Hamas. The UAE has recognized CARE as a terrorist organization alongside Al-Qaeda and ISIS, so we're not making this up. CARE members, by the way, they provided more than half of the donations for various political campaigns. Yeah. Wait, hold on a second. Where are the Justice Democrats about bribing politicians? Was it over $50,000, I think, from CARE?
Oh, wow.
They talk about, you're bribing politicians. Of course, it's a bribe. When it's a terrorist organization, you're a little fuzzy on the rules there, Cenk. How could Walmart give this much to Mitch McConnell? Well, hold on a second. What about the terrorist organization? Well, listen. We don't want to be sticklers. Reasonable discussion. All right, another example. While we're talking about this, the hits just keep on coming. I'm building a case here. Muslims of America, Jamaat ul-Fukra, I believe. So Rashida Tlaib donated and supported the campaign of a congressional candidate. I want to make sure I get this name right. Tahira Amatul Wadud. I'm probably wrong, but this is America.
Close enough.
Get them to pronounce Bobby. I'm sure it's the same kind of problem on Al Jazeera. And then they give $20 million to Young Turks.
Yeah.
So he was a board member of CARE and a lawyer for Muslims of America. Sorry, this is important. It was led by Sheikh Gilani, and it functions as a branch of the Pakistani terrorist organization Jamaat ul-Fukra. Okay? According to FBI documents, Gilani's followers in North America are, quote, encouraged to travel to Pakistan to receive religious and military terrorist training from Sheikh Gilani, and his organization has been tied to many terrorist training cells in the United States. Rashida Tlaib giving money to this organization's head lawyer with great vigor and zeal, might I add. By the way, hit notification bell if you haven't, or just bookmark this page. We upload a new video every single day. Of course, full show. You miss a ton of content at mugclub.com/mugclub because this video, of course, is not monetized. No. Another example.
Never will be.
This one is obvious, but that's why we wanted to go to kind of some examples that are off the beaten path. Hamas, right? Her ties with Hamas. And I know people are just saying, are you tying her with Hamas because she's a Muslim from Dearborn? No, so that would be enough. But Jake Tapper recently, I don't know if it was recently, he compared, I remember at one point, Hamas, I think, to white supremacists, which is an apt comparison if you look at Islamists and what they believe, certainly as it relates to Jews. An Al Jazeera journalist responded to Jake Tapper saying that this was bigotry and Islamophobia, okay? So I know this is a bit of a runaround. Tlaib piled on and said that comparing Palestinian human rights, human. I've been doing Hopper's voice too long for the commercial. Human, Palestinian boy, human. She said comparing Palestinian human rights advocates to terrorist white nationalists is fundamentally a lie. This is so important to me. This is what's so telling. The leftists, they always say, well, hold on a second. Palestine is not Hamas. You can't hold the people of Palestine accountable for their democratically elected terrorist leadership. They're separate. They're not one and the same. But Rashida, sweetheart, you are the one drawing the link that Hamas and Palestinian human rights, that they're one and the same. You are saying Palestine when the other person was talking about Hamas. You defended Hamas by saying Palestine. So the liberal lexicon, Palestine equals Hamas. That's important.
Yeah.
I think people need to notice that because often they go, well, hold on, they're not.
We didn't say that.
We didn't.
You said that.
You did. And by the way, when the New York Times reported Hamas, remember they fired 700 rockets, killing 4 Israelis. Tlaib said that Palestinians were being dehumanized by the headline that the attacks were just the actions of people who, quote, just want to be free.
Right. As though saying that and feeling that justifies killing innocent people.
Right.
All the time. Really? Yeah. That's your excuse.
Well, and this would be, you go, okay, hold on a second. Maybe she just misspoke 4, 5, 18 times
a day
with Hamas and Palestine. But here she is, a picture with a Hezbollah Hamas supporter, and she refused to denounce the picture. Right? I think we have a picture right here from the Times of Israel.
Boom.
Yeah. After she was the one who declined to go to Israel, Hamas came out and supported her. She supports them. They support her. Rashida, Hamas, Rashida. Rashida, Hamas.
Yeah. It's a reciprocal relationship. Very nice.
Oprah, Uma, terrorists, Michigan 13th District. It's amazing to me that this is, again, several times she's equated Palestine, Palestinians, and Hamas. Another thing that's really important, this is something that really changes the context here of the visit to Israel, which she begged for and then grandstanded and said I wouldn't do, is Mifta. Mifta, I don't know how it's pronounced. Some people may not know this.
Something close.
But this is important for why she was barred to Israel. Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib's, their trip to Israel, it was planned and sponsored by a group called Mifta, okay? It's a Palestinian organization that has published neo-Nazi manifestos attacking Jews, openly celebrating violent Islamic terrorism. They specifically celebrate.
Sounds bad.
Do we have any examples?
That sounds bad.
Do you think we have any examples?
Do you have examples?
Yes.
We do.
The group specifically celebrated an attack on Israel that killed 38 people, 13 of whom were children, as well as a suicide bomber, I think, who killed, was it 21 in Haifa?
Yeah.
Was that what it was?
Yeah.
I don't know. We have an overlay there. Think about this context for a second. We're all talking about how she's been barred from Israel and how they can't just bar people with unpopular opinions. The people, the group organizing Tlaib's trip, right?
Yeah.
It was a group that advocates suicide bombings that killed Israel and killed people in Israel, scores of Jews. This is a bombing right here. Some B-roll after the bombing. We don't want to show the actual bombing because we'll get removed from YouTube. So the people organizing the trip for her to go to Israel are people who want to see the destruction of Israel. I think it's also really important, kind of like we were talking about with Antifa not long ago. Find me the examples of her openly and expressly condemning Hamas, saying these are terrible people. They do not represent the Palestinian people. No, she's the one who creates this equivalency between them. And compare this, by the way, to the guilt by association to Republicans, right? People get really upset because Donald Trump retweeted a guy who has a Pepe meme, right? Or David Duke said something in support of Mitch McConnell on his Twitter. I have no idea, right? And they go, look at this, it's clearly the party of white supremacy. And by the way, we're going to talk more so about the Twitter blocking. Think about that comparison, right? It's like, oh, this is a white supremacist. Why? Well, why would David Duke endorse him otherwise? David Duke supported Barack Obama in a lot of ways. If you look at this guilt by association, of course you cannot tar and feather somebody because there are some unsavory supporters. That's not what's happening here. If we're going to talk about the ties, right? I hate to use the word unsavory, but let's just use it. Unsavory ties, which is unfortunate because terrorist food is delicious.
You could use ass.
The unsavory ties supports Hamas, has openly, I guess, palled around with organizations that have also supported Hamas and Hezbollah and published neo-Nazi manifestos, by the way. Could you imagine if this were to happen on the right, if Donald Trump retweeted or actually had an organization, right, spoke for an organization that had publicly published Nazi manifestos, neo-Nazi manifestos? And this is something that I've talked about many times before. I want to hear what you think. When you look at Islamists, particularly places like Hamas or Hezbollah or ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or really any Islamic government where they have death for apostasy and you're allowed, they're basically just Nazis who beat their wives. And these are the people Rashida Tlaib is in bed with. These are the people, if we're talking about money and politics, who's beholden to who? Who's pulling the strings? Well, guess what? I have far less of a problem, not saying it's great, with even big banks or even the Koch brothers than I do with terrorists pulling the strings like in Freddy Krueger 3, The Dream Warriors at that point. Hey there, YouTube viewer, you know the drill. Just click one of these other videos in a box playing up here. And I mean, there's an actual box. I don't, of course, mean that in the feminine sense. It's a slur, but that, of course, I don't mean box because men can have boxes too, and I don't mean to say box. That men can, there's like a DC outlet and an AC outlet, and they can be either one that they choose depending on the electrical current or the charge of ions, I think.